All right, welcome back. We are COMP125, that's client-side web development, in the summer 2020 semester at Centennial, and it's week 10, part 2 of our broadcast. We were talking about a couple of things last day, mostly around cookies and information security. And by the way, our session's live and being recorded right now. And what I wanted to do today was continue with the lesson we were running with last day, lesson 10, at least that project anyway, and then enhance it a little bit, right? Because we have to talk about this. So I'm just going to drag and drop that in there to make sure that we're running with the right stuff. And I'm not sure what this is, this home thing. So yeah, so we were running and we talked about cookies and how we can store stuff with cookies, and it's a very common way of doing things. And what we did was, using W3 Schools, we give a couple of functions. One of them was this set cookie function, which we made our own. And the other one was a get cookie function, get and set cookies, which is what we did. So kind of straightforward. These two functions allow us to set a cookie and get a cookie, and we can store information. Things like login information and a bunch of other information here, right, inside of this in this form. I want to talk about a couple of other ways of doing it, and then I want to move on to something else today as we move into the latter part of our course. Okay, I don't know why I have this home HTML. Let's get rid of it. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was, and if I go back to our PowerPoint, is the Web API. There are two different things we can do. One of them is using something called local storage, right? And local storage is interesting. It's kind of like a persistent cookie. And session storage, which only happens when it'll keep running until, or persistent until you close your browser. All right, so that's how it works. A little bit like cookies in some ways, just as good, right? One thing happens is when we go into using this storage, why do we need it? We need it because we want to store state. We want to store information, right? And with our single page application that we have going on right now, I'm just going to bring this up. One of the challenges, I'm just going to press Control backtick to bring it up and just do light server to get going on this. One of the challenges is this information here we have at the top of our page, which is what page are we on? So products, services, about us, and contact us. This is kind of advanced information that we have in here. And if I want to add information in about logging in and logging out, like a login page or whatever, and I want to say, is the person logged in, have they authenticated or whatever, and I'm moving from we're not moving from this page, but we're moving into different parts of our pages, or even down. Sometimes I want to keep track of certain factors, certain variables that I want to keep track of, and in my opinion, I'm not a fan of hidden form fields. I'm not a fan of that, although that is a solution, because it's still going to store data. And we also talked about last day a couple things. The application tab. The application tab has some information in terms of username and so on. Or we can store stuff in here. These are cookies, but we can also use session storage. Here's our session storage and local storage, which we're going to do right now. Okay, so local storage, session storage. Let's try those out and see how that works. By the way, also one more thing we did, we also converted our module. We used the ES6 module pattern last day. That's what we talked about. And we had to make a change to our index.html where we added the type module in there so that it would support ES6 and beyond module pattern. All right, that's what we did. So we got rid of the IFI, the closure that we used in our contact class. And as long as we have an export keyword that we use, and once we've done this, and there's a couple ways we can do this, we can use module.exports equals. That's another thing we can do. We can say module.export, right? And then equals to this, we can do that too. That's another way of doing the same thing, right? So module.export. So that is a couple ways, but really the export keyword is what we need. The export, what it does is the new way of exporting and using ES6 or and beyond the module pattern. But let's get back into this. So we use, you know, cookies. I'll leave the cookie example in here so you can, if you wanted to use cookies, you could, right? If I wanted to store stuff, but I'm not going to do that right now. Instead, what I'm going to do is we're going to use first session storage and then local storage. So if I start typing session storage, there are a couple of things you can do. You can clear, remove item, get item, set item, and so on. Okay, those are really, that's it. That's all you really can do, right? So if I do a set item, then you can see that there's two things, a key value pair. Perfect, key value pair, right? So if I say, well, the key is username and the value is Tom, and I set item like this, then inside session storage now you can see that I have a key username value Tom. So you can store information in your browser, right? And you know, as an example, it doesn't matter which page I'm on because we're in a single page application. I'm going to keep track of the username of the person, right? I can also keep track of things like my contact page. So if in my contact page, instead of storing things as an example, instead of storing things locally, like let's say if I enter in my first name and my last name, let's finish this part up for a second just to show you. So if I go Tom, and then let's say my last name, and we're going to go into my contact number and my email address and a message, you know, as an example. This, if I press after I've loaded this in, if I click send, then right now what it's doing is it's sending it to the console, this stuff. But wouldn't it be nice if I can store some of this stuff somewhere else? And what about storing a whole object? Can I store the object, or does it have to be string? So this is information that we need to kind of talk about, how to do this. So if we go to the context section of our page, again, going back to our app.js, and remember we have contact content in here as well, right? So I'm just going to scroll up to that. Here's contact content. And what I'm doing is I'm validating the form, and what I'm doing is I'm printing out this stuff. That's what contact content is. I'm going to use my validate form function. And in my validate form function, I check to see if things are good, and if they are, at the end, right at the bottom, I'm going to, you know, console out, right, my contact to string, my contact to JSON, both those two things. Well, could I not use storage, and we're talking about local storage, and we can say set item. How about set item instead of set interval Tom? Set item. Could I not say like my contact, and then, you know, instead of a value, now this is a string, I could do contact dot toString. Can I not do this? Can I do contact toString as an example and store that? And if I was to do this, and if I go to my contact page now and do the same thing, so let's say, for example, I say Tom, put this information in here, and then Tom at example.com, and my message is hello. Send. Then now we have some information we've sent. If I go to my application, where'd it go? Right? So here's local storage this time. Local storage gives me my contact, and local storage, just like session storage, does in the exact same way. Here I've got output string, my first name, my last name, but you see what I've got, unfortunately, is when I say toString, my value, right, my toString value, it's taken this entire thing and converted it. And if you notice here, it's like it's one of these. It just actually gives me my toString method is what's happening. So my toString method is the stuff that I'm outputting. That's what goes in my value, which is not what I wanted, right? So why? Because I didn't put the open close braces. That would be good. But it's interesting that it would actually store that way as well, right? So I made some mistake. Let's try that again. One more time. All right. By the way, notice our contact is still here, even though I've refreshed my page. Why? Local storage, right? Local storage is going to do it again. It's going to keep that until I override it with something else. So let's do it again. One more time. We'll use different names this time. Peter Parker, and then 416-555-5556, and then my email address is Peter. We'll make it even more interesting. Peterman@example.com, and hello. Right? And if I did this and I click send, then now what happens is it changes to this, right? So it becomes a string, but a string with formatting. First name Peter, last name Parker, and we can store all this information here in local storage, right, as an example. Again, here's session storage, here's local storage. If I kill my tab, right, as an example, kill my tab, and if I just go back and load it again, so localhost 3001, right, and if I was to look at my application, I might not notice any big differences, but here's local storage, still there, right, and here's session storage, right, still there, right. Either way, it's still there. Once I load this up again, even though I didn't load the program, because my code pushes session storage right now up, it looks the same, but actually session storage will disappear and will have to be regenerated every time I load up my browser, whereas local storage will stick around for a while, right? Almost like persistent storage than anything else. Okay, so that's kind of the difference between the two. They work identically though. Like for example, if I go to my validate form, local storage, you can see here I'm just pushing it local storage, I'm setting an item and removing an item. This is again really useful if I want something to persist from one page to the other. We only have one page, so it doesn't make any sense for us, because I mean really literally if I go from one page to the other, I can remember a lot of stuff that I've already done, but this is a great place to store it as opposed to storing it in memory. I can store it somewhere, do something else, and then come back to this. This is good, and this is, it sometimes solves a lot of problems for us for local storage. And as you saw earlier, right, if I go scroll down here to the bottom, session storage works identically. Set item. I can also get item. There's set item and get item. So if I set something like, okay, so session storage dot get item, and I have to specify the key, which is username, then it's just going to return Tom, right? That's my expectation. Username, if I spell it properly, username, and then what it does, if you hold up, if you kind of hover over it, returns a string. So if I hover over this method right here, it says it returns a string, which is Tom. So then I can just console log that, right? Console log. I'm writing to it and then reading from it. Once I write and read from it, we're good to go. And if I go back to my console, you can see that Tom is indeed here. I kind of wrote to it and I read from it. Session storage. So kind of interesting way of holding data. That's one of the considerations. The other one is sometimes I want to delete it. So if I say session storage dot clear, it says empties the list associated with the object of all key value pairs, right? So I said, okay, cool, let's get rid of that now. So first I set it, then I get it, then I clear it. And if I look at session storage now under application, you can see that there's nothing here anymore. We've cleared it manually. All right, you can do the same clear operation for local storage. So again, if I was to swim up to our validate form, and if I go to content, let's go to definition, and then from content, I go to validate for, go to definition, just jumping around here. And if I scroll down to that area that we did all that work, set item, I can definitely get item, but I can, so that's local storage, get item contact, so we can actually get this item. Now it's a string, we can parse it and make it, put it back into JSON format, right? So I can do something like console log. Let's console log that, just like normal. But I can also directly go to JSON, right? Because it's a string, I can kind of convert a string to JSON anytime, right? So that is something that I can do, a contact to JSON. But we want to parse JSON. We're going to parse this. This doesn't work right now because it's just a string, right? We would want to parse this, but then we can just delete it. So then local storage dot clear is also a thing, right? So we can store it and clear it. And if you look here, there's nothing here. And under local storage, right now there's something, but if I enter some other piece of data, so if I go to contact us and I make this work, so I do something like, you know, Bruce Banner, and I say my contact number is 416-555-5559. Email address is thehulk@example.com. Then if I go here and say, you know, Hulk smash, I don't know why I'm getting all these crazy spam. Hulk smash and then send. You can see that indeed it will wipe that out, the application, but if I go to console, you can see that Hulk smash is here. It's printed it out, and there it is in its fine form, right, as an object. So kind of cool, right? I mean, it's got everything we want in terms of us, you know, saving and loading to and from local storage or session storage. And a lot of times we store things with sessions because I want to move from one page to the other, and I want to keep track of, am I logged in or not? That's where the information is really stored. It's really about logging in and logging out, right? Who's logged in? Tom is logged in, right? From one page to the other. I don't want to authenticate myself every time I go from one page to the next, so I keep it in a cookie, let's say as an example, and then I can keep my status, whether I'm logged in or not. So I can use all three things, right? I can say, I can keep some information in local storage in terms of my preferences. Maybe I have my preferences that I load from a database. I load my preferences from a database, keep them in local storage or session storage. Typically in local storage, I load my preferences. So things like, do I want my page to be in dark mode? Do I want my app to work a certain way? Do I want certain items, if there's configurable items on my user interfaces on my app? Do I want them to be a certain look and feel or whatever? You know, the way, how many pages do I see on one page when it comes to certain things? All these things I want to remember, I can keep track of that and save everything in local storage or in my profile. And when I log in, it loads stuff from my profile and adjusts how I access the web application. Okay, so I can put all that in my local storage. But meanwhile, in session storage, I would access the cookie. I would probably have cookie-based authentication where I, you know, store my secret in a hashed value. I hash it, or I create this almost like this compressed kind of format where it's compressed and encrypted. It looks like nothing to us, like a bunch of gobbledygook, right, as an example. And then what we do is we load that in, decrypt it, see that the person is logged in properly, that it's actually the person, and then we store in session storage things like the person is logged in, yes, and who is the person? Well, it's Tom, as an example. That's the kind of stuff that we can put into session storage, as well as what is Tom authorized to do? Maybe Tom is authorized to do a couple of things. Can I increase the size of Visual Studio Code? Yes, I could. All right, so that is, this is not big enough? That's odd. Usually this is pretty good. Maybe you mean here. I can make this bigger too. Okay, so really that is how local storage and session storage works. Okay, really at the end of the day, there's different use cases for it. All right, And that's what this PowerPoint talks about. It talks about these methods. Remove item. We can remove a specific item. We can remove everything. We can add set item and get item. And these methods are the same for local storage and session storage. It just depends how you want, what do you want to do with it. There's also a few considerations in terms of security. One of the things is some people, let's talk about a malicious attacker, could on a website, on a malicious website or server, wait for somebody to come onto their website and load some malicious information on their in their session storage, local storage, or what have you, right? Or even in a cookie. And things like, I want to store some information that you take with you, and when you come back, you know, as an example, or maybe it's to the point where I can do some kind of malicious attack. And I'm not going to talk about how to do it, but there are ways of, by using the different web API, because anytime I can store stuff on, now normally it's on your web browser, but I can do some kind of attack. So again, one thing to always note is you always should think about your code as insecure, all right? And this is kind of in a way of thinking about defensive coding. So until you can prove it otherwise, your code is got holes in it. That's what you should think in your head, right? That means that you know, at the end of the day, you even if you do all your checks and balances, someone is going to find some kind of security or code loophole, if you will, to break your code. Especially when it comes to input. If you allow a user to input a message, I mean, I know that one of the things that people would do a lot, especially with a website like this one, is if I can input data in here, any kind of thing, even in my message, and then depending on how you encode this data and what you do when it comes to parsing the data. So if I take like raw data like Hulk Smash, that's one thing. But what if, I'm just putting it out there, what if instead of that, in my raw message, I put some kind of script tag? Like for example, I put in a script tag, right? And I write some kind of really weird script. What's going to happen with this? How does this work? Well, remember how JavaScript works. If I say something like class is equal to my class, right, and I put a script in there, you know, for example, I don't know, inside my script, I want to do things like, I use var, of course, I'm going to use var. Var, my variable is equal to, you know, 2000 or something like that, you know. As long as this is good, sometimes what happens is your message won't be filtered, right? So let's add some other stuff in there. So, you know, blah, blah. As long as I meet the criteria, who cares? I can put whatever I want in there, right? Because it's going to match the criteria of my contact information, right? Okay, let's try it so that it's like we just put in some random number, right? As an example. And why is this not working? That's interesting. Now, of course, it's okay. There we go. And then my email address is blah@blah.com. You don't know, right? And then if I click send, what does this do for us? Like, does it actually execute this script where my variable is equal to 2000? You know, let's take a look and see what it does. Well, it didn't. The script is actually just a it's just a string. But if I was to convert this string back into a JSON format, like here's my object, you know, as an example, we got to be really careful, because whatever I can, if I'm a smart coder, I'm just giving you some ideas. If I'm a smart coder, and if I'm someone who's malicious and have a malicious intent, I can think about injecting stuff in any one of these strings. And depending on how the my backend deals with it, it could be interpreted. Be careful about this. And this is injection. I can inject code or code injection. You know, depending on the website and how you code it. So always think about this. No code is safe. When you start doing stuff, you open up holes for attackers. So areas of concern are things like privacy, if I want to know, if I want to get information from you. For example, if you start entering things like your credit card information and so on, as soon as they get you to put in the credit card information, if you're going to a site that's not secure, you know, like let's say you go to a random site and they sell you some kind of product or an app, a little app that you want to use, and they ask you for credit card information, and they said, we're not going to charge you, we just want to get your credit card information so that way we can secure it so we know it's you. From a security perspective, we want your credit card information. And then you give it to them, right? Remember that could never go on a database, or they could take that information from you. As soon as you start typing, the field that we can listen for as an event and store things in different places. So be careful. Code injection is what I just talked about. That's something that can happen. Not just privacy, code injection. Things like ways of running system commands on your machine, you know, which is pretty you know, straightforward. Also, same origin policy or cross origin attacks, depending on how we do things. You know, for example, I can access things that are on the same origin, right? Like, for example, I can modify files or you know, set files from the same origin, but if I do cross origin, then it should stop me, right? Because otherwise, if I go cross origin, then it could be someone else, you know, some kind of malicious attack. And we can use the domain property of the document object, right, to you know, to change the you know, the origin of the actual document itself. Be careful about using third-party scripts like CDNs. One of the things we just talked about earlier was, hey, you know, it's better to use a CDN for Bootstrap and Font Awesome, but you know, if Bootstrap or Font Awesome becomes compromised, guess what? You're using their script. You become compromised as well. So be careful about this. Use verified CDNs. Don't just use a random CDN that you find on Google, right? So that's really, you know, kind of some structure in terms of being safe and secure. Because once I can store stuff on your web browser somewhere, you can be very creative. I'm sure you guys can think of creative ways of storing and retrieving data. And I think this is where, you know, you can put your client and yourself at risk. Okay, so that's what this section is all about. It's very high level and doesn't really go into much detail at all, but hopefully it will stimulate you into thinking about things a little bit more securely. How would any kind of info from the user, the more times I give the user a chance to put values into my browser, into my application, the more chance that the user can, knowing what the back end is, can manipulate things, right? And how do I know what the back end is? That's another question. So I want to know what the back end, what Centennial College is using as a back end. Well, there's a, you know, you can go to a site called Made With, right? And Made With, it allows us to, you know, so there's a way of checking to see what my, you know, what my website is made with. What website is made with? I think there's a site like that. Built with, it's called Built With. I'll be okay. Built with, and then what you do is you put in the website address. So, for example, you put in centennialcollege.ca. It'll tell you a lot of stuff. It'll tell you about Google Analytics being used on the site. It'll tell you about Twitter Bootstrap that they're using, or Twitter website universal tag. Facebook, they're connecting TikTok. Wow, they've even got that now. Different widgets that they've got, reCAPTCHA and so on. They've talked about COVID-19, and now we come down to frameworks. They're using ASP.NET. So they're using a .NET framework, specifically .NET 2.0, right? So it's interesting that they're doing that as a backend. So their solution stack is using ASP.NET, right? They've also accessed the jQuery CDN, the Twitter CDN, as an example. These are the things that they're doing for this. I mean, literally it tells you everything that the site is using, from HTML5 shims to different kinds of scripts, FancyBox, Moment.js, Slick.js. These are all libraries. Bootstrap.js. Look, these are all the libraries that this website is using. and so on. Okay, so why am I showing you this? It also tells you their certificate, where they got it from, and their web services. So they use IIS as an example, as well as .NET. So they're using a .NET stack, right? And let's look at another one. Let's look at Walmart as an example. Instead of Centennial College, look at walmart.ca. Walmart.ca. Once I understand, yeah, let's look at walmart.com. There we go. It's walmart.com/en. This is interesting. So they've kind of hidden away some of their stuff. It's an Akamai hosted website, and this is good. This is like telling you there's less information. Or how much what if I go to Netflix? All right, netflix.com. Right, so let's take a look at some of this. reCAPTCHA, and their framework is PHP with Java EE. They're using on the back end in Perl. So this is kind of their back end frameworks, right, which is interesting. They use Apple Pay and PayPal. It's connected to this as well. You're using Modernizer from a JavaScript library perspective, jQuery, HTML5 Shiv, required JS, Lodash. There's a security concern right there. React. So they have a React-based website, the React library. So the React is on their front end, right? That's how they do it, and so on. And their hosting services is by Amazon, right, for email, and so on. And Amazon is probably the back end. Looks like they're hosting on Amazon altogether. Amazon is their back end for what they're doing. So there you go. There's an example of that. They're using both Apache web servers and Nginx. That's the other web server type. But it looks like they're probably using more Apache than anything else because they're serving up PHP, right? So that's what it looks like from this particular from this build width. Okay, one more. What about let's look at Walmart. We look at Netflix, and some other providers that are very kind of common. We know Google. We can look at Google, but I'm just trying to think of City of Toronto. So remember, City of Toronto has a website. I think it's toronto.com. City of Toronto. Jobs. Okay, sure. Toronto.ca. Right, Toronto.ca is their website, their web service. Let's try that out. So let's put in Toronto.ca. And what is it made with? Okay, so they have some widgets, a WebEx widget. They're using cart functionality for their e-commerce. Frameworks are Java EE and PHP. That's on their back end. And what about server technology? jQuery Lightbox for images. Respond, Bootstrap, Moment.js, jQuery UI. Wow, that's old. ES6 Promise. So this is some stuff that some older backwards compatible stuff. Different SSL certificates here. Email hosting. I think they're doing so at their SPF. And oh, look, there's their web hosting. Web hosting on Amazon. So City of Toronto hosting with Amazon. And they're using an Apache server on the back end, which makes sense because their back end is PHP and Java EE, right? So that's the way it's done. So this is information, and once a malicious user has any kind of information about your website, you can take action. You can formulate a plan of attack to attack people or whatever, and we got to be careful. We got to make sure that all these endpoints, everything that this this website is using, I'm just looking at City of Toronto, is rock solid secure, right? Because if I can hijack or kind of transpose jQuery UI with something of mine or something like that, I know they're using Amazon, which is good, and an SSL certificate through Entrust. This is good. I mean, this is good protection, and we're talking about professional services. But always try smaller websites that you like to go on. Okay, one more, and then I'll stop, I promise. Right? Let's look at something like, I recently bought a computer. Let's look at Canada Computers. So Canada Computers, popular. If I go to CanadaComputers.com, that's the website, the web domain. So let's see what they're doing. They also sell stuff online. CanadaComputers.com. Okay. All right. So they're using Font Awesome as a widget. Their backend is PHP, right? As an example, they're using jQuery and the state of jQuery, Colorbox, HTML5 Shiv, and web servers Apache. Okay. So Apache PHP, that whole AMP stack, Apache and probably MySQL. We don't know if what kind of SQL they're using, but they're also being hosted on Microsoft Azure, which is interesting. So these are the things, the information we can get. Yes, they released version 6, Tiago. I like it. But these are the things this is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about these things because once we have information about a site, we can start formulating an attack. Because if I know what the backend is, if I know that the backend is PHP or even Node, then I can start thinking about ways of attacking. Okay. Questions around? Let me put this up on GitHub. This stuff here. So you have this idea for local storage and how session storage works. It's pretty straightforward. I'm going to put it up there for you. So again, these are the changes you've made. I'm going to say something like. Demonstrated local storage and session storage. It's really a contrived example, to be honest. Okay, there we go. So yeah, so that's the you know, from the get-go, when you think about this, this is some of the challenges we have. One thing is, now that you've come to this point in our course, remember that for the most part we're way ahead, right? We're way ahead for this course, and we're also way ahead in our Linux course if you're taking Linux with me. But I wanted to talk about some other additional things here, things that we're not getting great code hinting still. And there's ways of us getting code hinting without using TypeScript. So first, we can use TypeScript to give us code hinting for popular libraries, and right now we are using a few. We're using jQuery, Bootstrap for sure, and Font Awesome, those three. And if I want to get more code hinting for jQuery or Bootstrap, it's pretty good. Visual Studio Code has really improved a lot over the years, but I can do so if I open up a new PowerShell session, and if I want to add code hinting, I can use yarn for this. So I can say yarn add, and then what I want is at types. I want to get the type information, that's what this is, for, what do I want it for? jQuery. Right, and then I want to say -- dev, if I'm not wrong, which is a development dependency. And if I press enter, what it's going to do is going to get the code hinting information only for jQuery. So what does it do? Under our package.json, we have now something called a dev dependency. There's two types of dependencies. We have dependencies. These dependencies here in our package.json, think about package.json as a manifest. Right? These are required for our application to function. This is an option. This jQuery thing here is an option. And what this does is it gives me the ability for me to use jQuery and get code hinting on jQuery. Right? Now we haven't talked about jQuery too much, and to be honest with you, we don't need it. But one of the really cool things about jQuery is when it comes to Ajax. Right? So if I go back to app.js and let's go all the way to the bottom, right? If I start talking, I want to learn to use jQuery, I can use $. $. Gives me, hey, it's like shouting, hey jQuery, $. dot, and now I'm getting all kinds of code hinting, lovely code hinting for jQuery and all the different things. And this is coming from my my types information that's being held actually inside Node Modules. Node Modules has now a types folder, and in types I have jQuery and Sizzle. And what this does is it holds type information for my library. So I can get really cool information. Like for example, if I say .ajax, I want to use Ajax, and you can see how I can use Ajax. My settings, I don't have to worry about the XHR object to use jQuery and Ajax. I can do a lot of stuff right through, right here, right? Which is pretty cool. In fact, if I'm ever going to use jQuery, it's going to be for Ajax, okay? I can also use, I can do the same thing with Bootstrap. I can kind of go in here, and because right now if I type Bootstrap, if I start typing Bootstrap, you know, I have this, right? But Bootstrap, but dot, and I'm not really getting too much code hinting on Bootstrap, right? Like I can't really, I don't know what to do, right? But I want to use some kind of Bootstrap functionality, then I can do the same thing. I can say, hey, yarn add at types, and then Bootstrap. And I want to specify that it's a dev dependency, right? Minus dev, all right? And if I press enter, and if I typed everything correctly, then it'll go out, grab the latest version of Bootstrap 4.51. Now notice if I go back to my package.json, the latest version of Bootstrap that I downloaded from a dependency perspective is 4.50, and so too is the dependency. This is good. It's important that these two things are the same. All right. Example: if my dev dependency, my types, my definition library, basically it's loading up a definition library for Bootstrap and for jQuery, for me, for Visual Studio. All right. So that's what these things do. If these are different, then I might get a piece of functionality that's missing if it's old. From my Bootstrap. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at this then. And now if I go back to my app.js and I start thinking about Bootstrap, so I start thinking Bootstrap now, and maybe there's something I can do with Bootstrap, you know, that I couldn't do before, you know, and in this case not. But typically, you know, it gives you advanced information. So I can say something like, hey, Bootstrap, do something, right? But Bootstrap doesn't have a lot. You'd have to know what you're doing. They've hidden a lot of their stuff, because Bootstrap here, it looks like just like a method. It's an export, a namespace for Bootstrap, right? Bootstrap dot, and then there isn't a clear, you know, kind of header for how to use this stuff. So maybe not a great example for Bootstrap, but the idea is you can get information from this, right? For popular libraries like Bootstrap. Same thing with Font Awesome. I can't really use Font Awesome, but I can download and try and get this, you know, code hinting for my popular libraries, right? Taking it a step further, right, I can convert so far up until this point, we have been using app.js and contact.js, but I can fully convert my my files into TypeScript. I remember we talked about this before. TypeScript, people prefer TypeScript over JavaScript to run in, and you're going to say, wait, Tom, this is a JavaScript course, why are we talking about TypeScript? Because TypeScript is a very popular superscript of JavaScript that allows us to do, or superset of JavaScript that allows us to do more superheroic stuff, right? That is more difficult to do with JavaScript, and we can code faster with TypeScript. So there's a lot of, you know, kind of push towards in this direction, right? So if I go to Playground, we've been playing around with some of this, and you know, I want to convert from this to this, you know, as an example, and we've been doing it here in Playground. Like for example, my classic example is the module objects, you know, example, right? And inside my module objects, I want to export the class person, like we talked about before, right? So you can see the ugly JavaScript over here, or you can make sure on from a configuration perspective that because right now it's class person, it's looking at Ecmascript 2017. You can target an earlier version, and then it'll do that for you too. But how do we do this in code? How do I make this work like this in code? Because I want to use TypeScript. If I can make TypeScript the latest versions of my code, I want to use the latest kind of features of, you know, kind of JavaScript, and be empowered to get really cool code hinting on any kind of errors that I might have in my code. Because sometimes, even now, we can't see the errors. Sometimes it'll just run and it won't give us any feedback until we actually run it inside the browser, and that wastes a lot of time for us. And what TypeScript will do is it'll give us good tooling, good alerts, good kind of things underlined to make this run. So let's do a little example. We'll start off with TypeScript now as an example, And then we'll move into some advanced functionality with TypeScript as we go. Okay? So this is kind of where I'm going to go over the next couple of sessions. All right? Because you need to learn about TypeScript before you get into COMP125. COMP125 is going to use Angular. And we're going to definitely talk about TypeScript in COMP125 again. It'll be more of a refresher for you in your section than for some of the people who've never seen it before. Okay? Which is the majority of people. So this is what I want to do, but I want to do something like this in the browser inside of our project. So how do I do that? Well, first let's make a test script. So I'm going to go into scripts. I'm going to right click and I'm going to make a new file. And let's do this whole person example, right? So I'm going to say, but instead of making person.js, we're going to do person.ts. TypeScript ends with ts. Let's do this together. It's our first TypeScript file. Once we do this, Visual Studio Code identifies this as a TypeScript file. So that's what person.ts does. We can then code as we want. I can say something like module or namespace. Let's use module. Module objects. And then we can just code like we normally did up online. We can say export. Export exposes the class. Export class person. And the class person, like we've done before in the past, has a constructor which is going to be, it's going to take two things, name and an age. Name, which is of type string. This is important. Notice I can do this now. Name, which is of type string, and age, which is of type number. And then I can't do this dot name anymore is equal to name because we've never defined name. That's what TypeScript is going to tell you. This is wrong for TypeScript. For TypeScript, you've got to define whether it's private. So I'm going to say my private m_name variable, which is of type string, right, is what I wanted to define up here. And I'm also going to define a private n_m_age variable, which is of type number. So now this looks like more closely to C# or some other language, right? So here we would say this dot m name is equal to name, and this dot m age is equal to age, which is very similar to what we see in other languages. Let's also do the say hello thing. So these are public methods. We can use the keyword public in here and just call this method says hello, which also returns void. The method returns void, right? That's what colon means. Colon means returns or is of type. So this is of type, string, and this is returns, right? And if I hover over it, it tells you this, right? So it says objects.person says hello, it returns void. Okay, cool. And then we can say kind of a console log. We'll use the backtick character with $, curly brace, this dot m_name as an example says hello. We're not going to use a getter and setter just to make this example really quick as we get moving. So yeah, so we've got our thing, but we can't use a TS file in an index.html file. It just won't work. We can't accept it right now. What we need to do is something called transpilation or transpile, convert from TypeScript into JavaScript. That's what we need to do. In order for me to do that, I need to tell the compiler, right, the TypeScript compiler, how to make this work. So first, we need TypeScript on our system. So inside of our terminal, we're going to type in the following: npm install TypeScript -g. Okay, please do this with me, guys. npm install TypeScript -g. In fact, if you want to see the installation instructions, if I go back up to here to the documentation, and if I look at tutorials, TypeScript in 5 minutes, as an example, it tells you this exact thing: npm install -g TypeScript. That's the first thing you do. Okay, you install TypeScript on your system so it works. Okay, and that's what I've done here. I've just done the -g in a different spot. If I press enter, it's going to go out to the web, say, hey, TypeScript, I want to get TypeScript, and I load the latest package, which in this case is 3.9.7. I know you love TypeScript. I love TypeScript already too. All right, so that's the first thing you do. So first thing you do is you grab TypeScript and you install it. Okay. Once we install TypeScript, once we've done the installation, we need a TypeScript config, right? TypeScript config. So again, if you look at the example here for Greeter, they talk about this. They talk about interfaces and classes, and they talk about how to install a regular Greeter.js, and then they talk about how to they need to transpile, right, from TypeScript to JavaScript. That's what you have to do. All right. So we need to make a new file here in the root. Make a new file, and it's going to be called tsconfig.json. So our tsconfig.json file is the second thing we need to do. The first thing we do is install TypeScript on the system. If you don't have TypeScript, you can't use TypeScript, period. All right. Now that we've installed tsconfig.json, we need to configure it. And we need to say something like, if I press Control Space gives us some options, right? Because Visual Studio Code, this is why I love Visual Studio Code. It gives us some stuff from the get-go without coding anything. Just as soon as it knows that we're inside of a tsconfig.json and I've opened up these curly braces, because we know we're making a JSON file, then it says, if I press Control Space, that's all I did, Control and Space, it gives us some example options. What we want to start with is compiler options. We want to click this button, all right? So, which means compiler options. And now I'm going to press Control Space again. It's going to help me write my tsconfig, my TypeScript config. So what I want, these are all the different options we can turn on and off, all right? One thing I want is I want to specify the module pattern. I want to say module, Control Space. I want to make it so that I'm going to use, in this case, I want to use the CommonJS module pattern. CommonJS. Okay, that's what I want to use in my case. I also want to specify the target. So Control Space. I want to start typing target. My target. What is my target? And if I whip this out, these are my viable targets. I can specify ES 2015, ES 2016. But let's say I want to support an older browser, like for a few years ago. And let's say I'm working in a bank or a government institution, and I have some older browsers that are still in use, maybe. I want to use Ecmascript 5, or I have some customers that use older browsers, older customers that haven't updated their Chrome or whatever, or they're using some kind of mobile browser. ES5 is a safe bet. Let's target that one. And the next one is I want to have source maps. So I want to say source maps is true. That's going to help me code in TypeScript. So those are the basic 3 compiler options I want you to start with. Again, let's recap. Install TypeScript first. Make a new file called tsconfig.json, right? In tsconfig.json, put these options for now, okay? And now I'm going to ask you the question, are you with me? Check mark for yes, X for no, hand for just watching. Okay, because I want to know if you guys are with me, and it's totally okay if you're just watching. But I want to see, the more you get better at doing this kind of stuff if you're doing it with me, guys, right? So that you understand what's happening. All right, good, excellent, guys. Some guys are doing it with me. Okay, cool. So now that we have this part, we have our compiler options set up and our TypeScript that's in here. We can change this compiler option anytime, by the way. The next part I want you to do is I want you to press the buttons in sequence, Control, Shift, and B. Control, Shift, and B all together on your app. So Control, Shift, B will bring up. Let's actually go and do this properly. Control, Shift, B will bring up this little option right here. Right? There's 2 options here. So it comes up on the top. I'll show you this again. So again, it doesn't matter where you are as long as you're in your script. So if I go to, let's say, my person.ts, doesn't matter, you can put any script. And if I press Control Shift B, then it'll bring up this little option. There's 2 options, right? TSC build, TSC watch. What does this mean? TSC build means just build it and transpile once. TSP watch means build it transpile and watch for any changes. If I change it, automatically transpile again. Guys, I always like to watch, right? Because what it'll do is it'll go through and transpile this thing and make it into JavaScript. And it creates a JavaScript file right here. And this is your JavaScript file it created for you. So here's how we wrote it. Nice, nice. Here's what happened to it. Not nice, but we don't care. This is compatible, and it even uses var, right? It's compatible with obsolete older technology. Are you with me? Have you done this? Have you done the Control-Shift-B? Some people are just watching. Other people are clicking the yes. Thank you. Awesome. So you're doing this for the first time, and this is great. Cool. Thank you, guys. I'm just going to clear all that. So yeah, so we've compiled everything. Now we need to attach this file, person. We need to attach person to our files like normal. So if I go to index.html, here's my index.html. It has to be before the app.js, somewhere up here. We're mixing and matching one TypeScript file along with regular stuff like contact. So I'll say script source, right? And we won't use the module pattern. We'll just say the source. So it's / scripts / person.js. We have to use JS, not TS. All right. So again, we're still using the person.js. Nice, nice, right? Everything's beautiful. Let's take a look at our app.js and see what's happening here. Did it cause any issues that we've moved into TypeScript territory? Well, look, here we have our import contact from contact. That still looks like it's okay. But now we have something else. I can go into my start function just to test along with everything else. And let's get into this, guys. Let's really test this out. Okay, so I want to do the following. I want to use my person class. I want to say, hey, let Tom equal to a new object.person. But let's go further. Yeah, let's actually do it. Is equal to a type objects.person. Well, now here's where we get a little bit, we're going to get in trouble. Objects.person. Because here, our app.js, as an example right now, I'm just pointing this out, right? Because we've moved into module pattern, right, we're mixing and matching, we have no code hinting right now, right, in our app.js. We're mixing and matching from our person.js file, which is in another file, here, okay? So for now, this is the one we can do. We can just say, you know, tom.sayshello, right? We're going to remember because we have no code hinting, right? And then we run our file. We go back to our website here. And if I go into inspect, right, in my console, then we're hoping we're going to see. Now it says objects.person is not a function at start. Okay, so this is an issue, and this is on line here, you know, kind of at line 460. So why? It should work. I mean, remember that we're attaching a JS file, right? This is important. So first of all, let's check to see if everything has been saved. First thing, okay, so our index.html, yes, it has been. Here's our person.js, which is right here. You can see here that I'm actually exporting objects.person like normal, right? Okay, but, right? What's happened is we've mixed and matched both JS and TS files, JavaScript and TypeScript files. We can't make this a module, okay, like the way we did before. I mean, I could totally do it, right? We can't make this a module. Or I can specify the module pattern right here. Instead of my common.js, right? Remember, we can transpile again at any time. Control space, I could use Ecmascript 2015 or beyond, this one, this module pattern. And if I'm going to do this, I can actually convert my target to something that's more reasonable as well, because you know we know that it's supported by different things. Let's move to Ecmascript 2015. We're not going to go too much more than this. If I press save now, and because we're doing our TypeScript class that is being run, it's saying, hey, by the way, I'm not sure where my import popper.js, how come this is not working anymore? It's trying to do this inside of @types bootstrap because it's trying to read this bootstrap file, so it's getting an error. It's okay though. But now, if I go up to my app.js, right, what do I get? Do I get any more code hinting? And this is the thing. The answer is no. Okay, no code hinting. Not right now. Remember, we're using that module pattern, the module pattern that we're doing. And what does the module pattern look like in my person.js again? Well, person.js now has been converted to the newer way of doing our constructor functionality and all that stuff. Here's var objects and so on. Again, what you're going to notice is if I go up to my website and go to console, I'm going to get this error, right? Objects.person is not a function. Can I import it, right? So if I go into my app.js and I scroll all the way to the top, right? Can I do an import? Can I do an import? Because we're making it use of this statement. So I'm saying, can I look at person? Can I load person from / right person.js? Can I do this? Is this enough? Person.js. Does this give me the person class that I want to use? Can I do this? Objects. So now it's not, instead of person, objects.person, we're just going to use the person class, right? Is that something I can do? And well, remember, we can't mix and match so easily. So if I go down here, well, then I'm still getting no code hinting. And I can tell we're having a problem because of this, right? Absolutely tell, right? Now back to this, you can see the requested module person.js does not provide an export named person. Well, we actually do, right? Here's my person export right here, right? And it doesn't seem to like this structure at all. Again, we can continue to fool around. I'm just showing you some options. I know how to fix this, but I want to talk about the module pattern. So this is Ecmascript 2015 module pattern. There's also AMD and system. Let's try and see what system does for us. So system, Control S, and when we do that, what do we get from a person.js perspective? Doesn't look like anything that we want to use. If I go back and change my person.ts, and let's suppose I want to use just export now, because I remember I'm writing it for Ecmascript 2015. What does this convert to? Does it convert? In my person.js it says system.register, because we're using the system module pattern. And yeah, no, I don't want to do the system. So system is no good. Let's go back to Ecmascript 2015. I'm just showing you what it does. It transpiles a bunch of different ways, right? How about this? So this is good. This is promising. So I took away my IFI, my module, my TypeScript module, and now I'm using the module pattern that is inside of this, okay? Which is my typical module pattern, okay? And I've included it in my app.js. So on my app.js on the top, I've included person, and person is declared, but its value is never read. Import person from person.js. And then down in here, if I hover over, I don't want to use objects.person anymore. I just want to use person. Okay? Import person. Tom is now of type any, right? As an example, if I did this, it says unexpected token export inside person.js1. Person.js1 has this export class person, and it's unexpected because in my index.html we're not following the pattern. So I would have to put in, just like before, type is equal to module. Okay, same as before. We're hoping that it's going to, you know, catch this. The requested module .person.js does not provide an export named person, doesn't it? Well, let's see. So person.js. Oh, we called it person lowercase p. My bad. Let's make sure that the class is called person uppercase. This is good. We're fixing our problem, right? And now we're good. Now we're good. It says undefined says hello. Why are we undefined? Because in my app.js, I never defined what person gives me. I never defined a string, age, or name. Let's do this. So I'm making random things. 23, I would love to be 23 again. And now you can see Tom says hello, right? So this is good. If I hover over, you can see now that Tom is indeed a person. Okay, cool. Let's back up and let's start doing it the other way. So this is definitely some way that works. We can definitely do it this way with TypeScript, especially if I use person.js. Okay, cool. So I can mix and match the output of my TypeScript module. I can write TypeScript the way I want. And I can mix and match my TypeScript with JavaScript. JavaScript will be read like this. This is the actual code that's being written. This is the code that I write. Okay? Let's take it further. So now let's make it so it's more like I like. So I'm going to say module objects again. Let's put that module back in place. I want to support my module pattern, right? All right, so now I save it. Now what problems do I have? It says, okay, cool, the requested module person.js does not have a person. Well, no, it doesn't. Because now, if I go back up to my app.js, I'm saying, hey, go into person, import person from person.js. But it's not this, it's objects.person, right? That's what it is. And objects does not compute. Objects does not compute. Let's, instead of that, let's just comment this out, right? And go back to my index.html and take away this module pattern altogether. Okay, it's taking this away. When I convert from TypeScript to JavaScript, we can see that I don't get my export anymore. I get the iffy back again. I need to make this class exported. So in my TypeScript, notice it says export class person. Even though export is here, because person.js does not include it, right? It says class. This is just exposing objects.person out here as normal. Okay, just like the normal way of doing things. If I go back into my app.js now on the bottom, I can't use new person. It has to be new objects.person. And if I hover over, I'm not getting any code hinting again, right? So this is just not going to happen. It's not going to cut it this way, right? And furthermore, if I go back out to the web, it works. Tom still says hello, but I'm not getting any clear definition, right? I could declare, I could create another file, a person.d.ts file. A D is a definition file that gives me code hinting here, but it's a lot of work for me. If I'm going to use TypeScript, then I want to use TypeScript. And the next thing I can do is convert. I want to convert my contact.js and my app.js to a TypeScript file. How do I do that? So step by step, start with contact.js. So contact.js, I want to rename. I want to call this contact.ts. Now, because I'm watching, it automatically converts. It automatically converts from a TypeScript file to JavaScript. JavaScript doesn't matter, it doesn't care. TypeScript cares. TypeScript says, whoa, I don't have first name, last name, email address, I don't have any of this stuff. In order for me to do this and to do it easier than what I'm doing here, right, first name, last name, and so on, there is a quick fix for converting TypeScript to JavaScript, or JavaScript to TypeScript. Just put public in front. Public, 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 public. What this does is it actually does a shorthand for running a getter and setter. In fact, I don't need to do any of this anymore. And if I convert, notice if I just did this, I convert. Now my contact.js on the other side, it's normal again. This is the normal way of doing things. But on the TypeScript side, contact.ts, my constructor is much simpler. My toString method should return something. It returns a type string. We can say that it returns a string now, right? My public first name is of string. You can also be very specific that first name is a string, last name is a string, email address is also a string. You can be very explicit, or you can use implicit casting, which is if it's a string, then if it looks like a string and it acts like a string, it's a string, right? So that's what we could do as well. So we could be more explicit. This is on the TypeScript side now. Okay, so again, TypeScript, JavaScript. We got two files now instead of one. Actually, three with the map. And now it tells me that output string is an unknown word. Output string is of type string. but this is just linting. Linting doesn't know what this is. My return type is a string. This type is a string. We're good to go. It doesn't affect what it looks like here on the JavaScript side, right? JavaScript, same as before, nothing different. Same thing with JSON. I can say that my JSON returns a string. I can make this public or private. I can indicate public. Same thing here. I can say that these are public methods. ToString, public. One thing it says that my JSON object, this is interesting, it's conflicted. It says, whoa, wait a minute. JSON object, well, to JSON, I want to return JSON. It says, this doesn't make any sense that I'm returning JSON, right? So we can say that it returns that. If I hover over it, it'll tell me what it returns. It says it will return an object, a type object. Look at that, right? I can't specify a JSON object. I can't do that. I mean, it won't allow me to do this, to say JSON, because every JSON object is different. So when you're stymied and you don't know what the type is, you can always specify any. All right. If ever you have a problem and you want to make it compatible, backwards compatible with JavaScript, you can specify type any. Is there a convention? Yes, properties should be capitalized, but I'm just trying to convert what I have right now. Set contact. I'm getting JSON data, right? So it's going to be of type object, object in, right? And we don't know JSON data. If I say there's an object that looks like this, right? There is no object that I've defined that looks like JSON data, right? So there's ways around this. There's a structure around this, right? To give me code hinting, right? Because otherwise, if I just put any like this, again, when you use any, it's like, I don't know what I'm getting, but we are assuming that this is going to work, right? Again, all I'm doing is trying to convert right now from JavaScript to TypeScript. And we'd convert one file at a time and check it. So let's convert this one, save it, go back to contact.js and see if there's any appreciable changes. Any kind of thing that looks raw, and you can see if it works or not. So contact looks okay, right? We can see contact. This all works. So this is working now. So we've converted our contact.js to our contact.ts. Okay, now this is the big one. App.js. I want to convert my app.js to an app.ts. We're going to have lots of problems here, but let's do it anyway. So we're going to convert. We're going to refresh or rename. And we're going to say app.ts. Cool. We've converted now to TypeScript. Everything is TypeScript. Everything is TypeScript. Okay? But there might be some errors. Let me just go in here and see. And there's a ton. Look at all this. These are all errors, right? First name.value, right? And so on. Why is there errors and before there wasn't? Well, we have to understand how things work. So first of all, this function ID, what does it return? Let's start with one thing at a time. This function returns void. It doesn't return anything. What is this ID that we speak of? Right now it's an ID of type any. But actually what it is we take the ID, which is this, right? And this is an ID that's the anchor string. So ID is equal to the anchor string. ID is the anchor string, okay? Nav anchors is a node list of element. That's what this is. Let nav anchors, you can see that it's a node list of element type. For anchor, which is of type element of nav anchors, you get more code hinting. You see how this works? Anchor.className, class name is a string. All right, you can see that the code hinting I'm getting. And then I'm checking to see if this is equal to a string. The ID is equal to a string. If this is matching, which means ID must be a string for it to work. All right, so we can say that ID, we're listening for an ID that's a string type. We're just developing code hinting here. Going to the next one. This is the big one. Validate form. It's a new contact. A contact, because this works up here, way still. This stuff here is still functional, right? because we're using the module pattern. That's Ecmascript 2015. Then contact is a contact. We can get that information because we've converted now fully. We can get that. Contact form, it says, is an HTML form element. Forms 0. Document.forms computes. Okay? Where we start getting issues is this first name here. Okay? So first name itself is an HTML element. Think about what we're asking it to do. But I'm saying this HTML element because I'm saying get element by ID. Do we know what type of element this is? What is first name that we're tapping into, right? This is what TypeScript helps us understand. What is first element? Man, I'm getting bombed by email right now, just by chance. And what is error message? It's just an HTML element, right? So to specify this, and now we're looking at validate form, which means it's on the contact form, right? By the way, this is converted. Don't worry about it not converting. It's converted nicely to JavaScript. In fact, for the most part, my app is still going to run. Just me converting it from TypeScript to JavaScript, no problem. Or JavaScript to TypeScript. But what I want is my code hinting. I want my app.ts to run properly and give me an error. It's saying I don't know what value is. Why? Because we've indicated that first name is of type HTML element, right? HTML element. Why is that? Because if you look at my first name, and that's in my contact page, let's look at my views, content, contact, right? Where is first name? First name is here. First name is of type input. It's not just an HTML element, but rather it's an input type. It's an input type. Okay. So is there another way? JavaScript says, TypeScript says, is there another way, Tom, that you could have specified what first name is? You can't do this like you could in you can't say as input, HTML5 input. You can't do this, right? If you did this, it takes away the error, right? Because all I'm doing here is I'm casting, right? Well, you can do it, but be careful when you do this. It doesn't always work the way it's happening. So now first name is not just a regular element anymore, but it's of type HTML input element, which means now I'm going to get code hinting. I know that value is a string. Look how beautiful that is, right? That I can do this. I'm giving me more information for code hinting. I'm saying, hey, by the way, when I read my code now, first name, I know what first name is. It's an HTML input element, not just a regular element. What about error message? Error message hasn't sparked out yet, but somewhere down the line, it's going to happen. Here's last name. Last name is also as an input element. Let's fix this. So last name, right? Contact number. This is where our errors are. We want to know what they are, and that's what is causing our problems. The value part. We don't know because regular HTML elements may or may not have values, right? Whereas input elements absolutely do have values, right? They absolutely do have values. Submit button we know is of type HTML element, but this seems to be working okay. And up until the end of this form, that's the little fix that took care of everything. So far, we've got rid of the majority of our errors from our function validate form. Validate form, does it return anything? Yes or no? The answer is no. So if we go back up to the top, we should specify by convention that this returns void. We don't have to. It's implied anyway. But now we're making it return void. Okay, cool. So we fixed that function. Let's go to the next function. We'll fix them all. All right. Set page ID. Okay, what is this ID we speak of? Well, title is a string. And since ID is being passed to the title, then we can think that ID is also a string. What does this function return? Nothing. Let's return void. Okay. Again, we're guarding our structure here a little bit. So far, so good. So far, so good. Okay, we're going into our function Initialize Site. This is the big one. Initialize Site. Does it return anything? No. All right, we don't return anything. Let's return void. Right? Console info works okay, gives us some good code hinting. XHR is an HTTP request. This is good. We can do all this work and we're not getting any errors. No errors is a great sign, guys. No errors is fantastic. Even here, look, it's listening for an ID to be a string. That's what our set page content is, remember? And so too, we're giving it a string because link.getAttributeID returns a string. We can use implicit casting this way and it's not a problem. We don't have to specify that ID is of type string, although if we want to be explicit, we can. Right? We could do this too if we really want to. All right, so we've done all this. We're getting towards the bottom, or towards the middle actually. Load address book data. Okay, what does this return? So going to the bottom, it returns void. Let's put that in there. We're just converting. This is the process of migrating from JavaScript to TypeScript. These little underlines are, we don't know what address book says. It's probably misspelled. That's what it's asking me. Is it misspelled? That's the linting part of my Visual Studio Code. No, but there's no error here. Okay, so far no errors. Let's keep going. It returns void. We're good. If we're using lets everywhere, which is fantastic. Now this is bad. JSON.parse XHR response text object. All right, and we're converting it to something. My data file. My data file says of type any, because we don't know what the JSON is going to look like. We can't define that it's a type object, because if I do that, if I say, well, it's got to be of type object, you know, we could do that, but then further down the line, we're going to say, well, address book, I have no idea what this is, because this object is undefined. I could specify my pattern for this object somewhere else, and that would take care of my issue. But for now, we can leave it as type any. All right. Again, sometimes we have to make these concessions when we're converting from JavaScript to TypeScript to make sure that it's all compatible. Cool. For const record, this looks okay, right? This looks okay. This is a template string that we're putting together. Hopefully, you guys did this for some of your assignments already. Template strings. You could have done that for some of your stuff you did. Here's my load footer. What does my load footer return? Void. Doesn't look like I'm getting any errors, so we're going to leave it alone. We're going to move a little faster now. Same thing with about content. It also returns void. Lots of voids, right? Contact content returns void. No errors. We're pretty good actually. Converting this. We wrote nice code. Otherwise, we'd have all kinds of problems, right? Usually we get more than this. Way more. Products content, again, return void. We're still good, right? Services content returns void. Again, it's implied. I'm just being more specific. Set cookie. Okay, what does this return? Void. It's not being used right now. That's why it's grayed out. One thing to note is these things here: cookie name, cookie value, expiry and date, and path, can all be specified as strings. So we can request strings come into play. So we should write it like this. Whenever we have parameters, we should specify what the parameter is requesting. All right, string, 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 and this is even a string with a default value of \. Okay, now we have a problem. It says expiry in days, and we're multiplying a string by a number. So we know that this was an incorrect assumption for me. It should be a number, because number is definitely a data type for JavaScript. String and number. Cool. So far so good. We're good. Date is of type date. This is of type number. Why? Because it's multiplying by another number, and this is good. Let expires is equal to a string. Okay. Just making it nicer. Same thing here. We're going to return void, but my cookie name is going to be of type string. Okay, this looks like it's okay, but then we come down to here and we have a problem. So this getCookie function is written badly. And this is where I was hoping to get to something that has a problem. Why? Well, we're telling it returns void, but it's not really returning void. It's really returning a string. So this should be string. Okay, and that's definitely something that gave us an error. Why? We assumed it was returning void, but here we have return statements, And both of the return statements, this one and this one, if I go to substring, it returns a string, and here it's the string literal, so there must be a string that we're returning. Okay? I was hoping it would be more complex than this, but that's okay. And now start. Start also returns void. It doesn't return anything. And we're back at the bottom of the code. And guys, we've done a straight conversion from TypeScript to JavaScript. Where we're getting a bit of an issue is one of the node modules for Bootstrap. Let's remove this index.d.ts file. We can remove this because in our we're not using Bootstrap anyway. So to remove a file, to remove a module, we can go just like we did yarn add. We can go yarn remove. Right? We want to remove or uninstall. So remember, yarn has a bunch of functions, right? So yarn can add, yarn can config, yarn can create, yarn can install, yarn can remove, and yarn can uninstall. It supports all those things. So yarn remove at types, and we want to remove Bootstrap, because that's the thing that's asking for popper.js. -- dev, please. And what this is going to do is, in our package.json, it's remove that development dependency. And now we're not going to have any issues. Not that I want to get rid of my issues, but there's not really an error. It's just the way we're mixing and matching TypeScript and JavaScript, and it's giving me a bit of an error. Guys, we're fully a TypeScript application now. We've converted from JavaScript to TypeScript. For me, it's showing what it says. It's showing error in nav links and anchors. Do you think TypeScript will replace JavaScript in the future? I don't think TypeScript will replace JavaScript in the future. I think actually it'll be the other way around. I think what's going to happen is JavaScript is going to get better and better, and it's going to include features that TypeScript is already using with some other features, and it's going to replace, there's not going to be a need for TypeScript anymore. I think JavaScript is going to push the limits. TypeScript is a middle step between where we are with JavaScript, the new way of doing things, and where we want to be. All right? So that's what I think. Nav links and anchors. Can you show me, Anubin, can you show me that error? Maybe you want to type it in your terminal there, and then I can help you out. So yeah, so we've converted everything, and now the big test is, does it work? And the answer is yes, it does work, right? That's the main thing. Does our site still function with TypeScript? And it certainly does. Certainly does. Okay? So that's pretty cool, guys. That's that we've converted. Okay? Let's put this up on GitHub. So here, I'm going here, there's all these changes. I'm going to add this in. These changes, by the way, are because of my settings. I have an extension that does a history. That's all it does for me. Okay. I'm going to say that added the changes. I'm going to say converted or migrated. We'll say migrated to TypeScript. Okay. And then push. So we're migrated to TypeScript right now successfully. Nicely. So, wow. We did this, and you're going to say, who cares, Tom? And I'm going to tell you, well, here, once we've converted to TypeScript, guys, then the sky is the limit. The sky is the limit of what I can do. Remember that here's my module objects. I'm mixing and matching. I've got my module pattern here. I've got my standard pattern in other places. So if you notice, if I went to my TS file of my app.ts still uses the import pattern. We can still do this when we need to, right? If I want to be compatible with existing JavaScript, Ecmascript 6 as an example. And I can write new scripts. Let's write a new script for student. We'll call it student.ts, right? Student.ts will also be in the module objects. And in my module objects, I will export my class called student, which extends the person class. Okay. In my constructor, I will call my name, which is of string. Actually, yeah, we'll do this like this. It's name string, age is a number, and student ID is also string. We'll take care of the super constructor. Notice that if I didn't do this, it would say, hey, there's a problem. You need to take care of your super constructor. My super constructor, it tells me what I need, name and age. And then we can just simply say that my student ID is a new property. So I can have a private member called m_student ID, which is of type string. And then I can have getters and setters, get string, which returns a string type, get student ID, I'll be okay, which returns a string type. And I can say that this returns return, if I can type today, this dot m_student ID. So this is how you do a getter. So these are your properties. You can break it down like you do in C#. Private instance variables. Oh. Let's try that again. I don't know what happened there. My typing. Oh, what the heck? It's just me. It's not you. It's me. What the? Dude. Okay. Private instance variables or fields. Okay, it's me typing something again. Fields. I had this really weird problem before. My keyboard is really acting weird lately. All right, and this, of course, would be public properties. Public properties. Okay. Private instance variables, public properties. This is just a read-only property, which is student, but I can also have a setter, which takes a value, right, which is of type string, right? I can call it whatever I like, and I can say that this dot m_student ID is equal to value. Value is not a keyword. You can use whatever you want in here, okay? And this, now we have a public property and a constructor. We can also make a public method called studies. Let's use capital studies to take care of those people who are bothered. Returns void. And we can say console log, like we've done before, backtick. And this time we can use the property, this dot student ID, right, is studying. Tamana, you just came off of mute. Please keep yourself muted. All right, so there we go. Awesome, right? We've done this kind of thing. And you can see what we're doing here. We've got our student, our constructor for our studies, and what does this look like on the JS side? Like this, like nice. It's beautiful, right? It's still compliant with Ecmascript 2015, no problem. We can have our cool tooling on my side, on our side for TypeScript, where we know the types that are going to be laid out. Okay, this is nice. So we know we can do this. Now the one thing you need to add is in my index.html, we need to add in a my script tag. That we have to do. Script source /scripts/student.js. We have to put student after person because student depends upon person for it to work. Okay? So mixing and matching, no problem. And then in my app.ts, if I scroll all the way down to the bottom, I can say that we'll say let Peter is equal to a new objects.student, and I'm going to get great code hinting, guys. Take a look at that. All right, my code hinting is going to be Peter, my age is 22, and my student ID is A123456789 0. Okay. And guess what? Peter says hello, works, and Peter studies. And it gives me good code hinting, no problem. I can also rename stuff. Let's say, for example, I want to rename my hello, says hello here. I can go here and go rename symbol. So if someone said, hey, you should make it caps. Okay, let's do it. And now says hello is caps. Okay, for both. And notice that the TypeScript file for person has been changed. Right? Nice and easy. And we're good to go, right? Let's see how this looks inside of our code. And if it has a problem, it says Tom says hello is not a function. So why is that? If I go back to my app.ts, right? Sometimes what happens is it says public says hello void, right? And I'm trying to make use of a says hello function. And what happens is it needs to transpile one more time, right? Peter says hello. You can see Peter says hello Peter is indeed an object. And I've just messed up because basically if I went to my person class, here's says hello, my person class. I need to transpile. A lot of times what happens is you need to transpile if there's a problem like that because I renamed. It renamed one part but not the whole thing and didn't save. If it doesn't save, it won't transpile into this, right? So what we saw on the TS side was one thing, but what we saw on the back side for the JavaScript was maybe something else. But now it's been corrected. A lot of times if you have a problem like that and you're like, wait, I shouldn't have a problem, just retranspile. So press Control S, save, and it'll automatically transpile for you. Guys, this is fantastic and it works and we're still good. You can see that Peter says hello. Undefined is studying, and this is a problem. Why is undefined studying? Well, this is good. So how can we fix this problem? Well, now with the advanced method that we have, we did student ID, but we never actually took student ID in. You can see that this is grayed out. So here we can say that this dot student ID is equal to student ID, and now it's going to fix that problem here, right? Peter says hello. And A123, what the heck? A123, oh, we went student ID is studying. Sure, okay, but we really meant our name, right? So here's something else. So name is not available, you know, to this name m_name. Remember, because m_name, we're going to get an error here in TypeScript. TypeScript says something's wrong. m_name is private, but if I save it, it'll still run. It'll still run because on the back end it's just JavaScript. But here in TypeScript it says something is done wrong. You've done this incorrectly, Tom. You need to fix this problem. This is not good form. All right. m_name, you should just be telling you m is a private variable. You shouldn't have access to m_name at all. So what it's going to tell me to do is maybe we should upgrade our person class and create getters and setters for name and age. Right? So let's do that. Now we're just going to say again, these are private instance variables. Or fields. Here we're going to make some public properties, just like normal in C# as an example. We don't have to use public because they're in TypeScript. If you use a getter and setter, it's assumed it's public. So public name, right, which returns a string. And what we want here is that it's going to return this dot return this dot m_name. Okay, and then set name of value, which is of type string. Right, well that's going to say that this m_name is equal to value. Okay, so this is all the same stuff you're used to with C# at this point. Let me just copy paste this just to make it really quick, right? And instead of name we'll say age. Age is not a string but rather a number, right? So we'll say that this m_age, all right, is returned here, and this is age. Value is no longer a string but a number. And this is m_age, which is equal to the value. So now we've got our getters and setters, And here it doesn't behoove us to do this at all, but in fact what we can do is we can say that name is equal to name and age, capital A, right, is equal to age, all right? And we'll do the same thing here. This is name, not age. Name. Getting bombed by emails today. Okay, so we fixed person class, and now in the student we can just use the getter for name, and now that's available to us because it is a public property. Now on the back end, guys, it made absolutely zero difference. Zero. It didn't do anything on the back end. But on the front end, it helps us code better. It helps us think about restructuring our class to make it look nicer. And this is what it looks like on the back end. The back end, no difference. Zero on the back end. Right? On the back end. On the front end, much better. Back end, you can see that it's a name and age, capital N and age. You can see it using these private properties, private instance variables. Name, right, is what it's going to return, right? And it's returning those things because it can. All right, so this is how it works. And now, as we go back out, we can see there's still no issues, and we're having great success with using TypeScript. And we've just made another subclass. We've used polymorphism, or actually, sorry, we've used inheritance, no polymorphism, here, which is great. And so inheritance becomes super easy to use in this object-oriented format. One thing to note is that there's a lot of files here, and you can use TypeScript to clean this up, right? To clean this up a little bit more, so it's not so bad. And the way to do that is, of course, is in my tsconfig.json, I can specify a out folder. So if I press Control Space, you can see that one of the options for this is an out directory or an out file. So I can actually convert completely from one thing to the other, which is pretty cool. So that's definitely something that I can do. I can specify an out directory. So even though my scripts folder is something where I develop, I could have a dist folder, a distribution folder, where I actually can combine all of my TypeScript files into one JavaScript file, which is pretty awesome. Okay, so this is before I get into, before I actually convert, and I'll talk about that another day. But there's lots of options here from our converter. Remember, we're converting from one thing to the other thing, and I think this is a great way, a great workflow, right, in terms of converting from one style to the other. And we want to get code hinting? No problem. Great thing about TypeScript is now that we've converted it, if I go back into app.ts, all the TypeScript features are available to me. So if I want to use, as an example, JavaScript or jQuery, again, I can say, hey, jQuery, let's do Ajax, right? And then we're going to get all of our still the same code hinting here as before. If I want to use Bootstrap, Bootstrap unfortunately does not allow that because I don't have that, or Font Awesome, right? We haven't really defined those things. So any new libraries that we use, we need to define this or have some kind of type definition. But for most new libraries, I would say a good 90% of libraries now that are being used out there in the wild, there is a TypeScript definition library, which gives you great tooling and code hinting for you to use in your application, right? Because one of the banes of, I would say the bane of JavaScript developers out there is they're using some kind of library, and that library they get no code hinting. They literally have to look everything up, right? Which to me is, the development is really slow. And JavaScript in general will not complain. Will not complain if you make an error, right? Here, now that everything is TypeScript, it will absolutely complain. Absolutely. For example, JavaScript would not complain if I did this. Study. We wouldn't even be able to tell that study in studies is wrong. It wouldn't complain. However, here it tells me that property study does not exist, right? Do you mean studies, right? Quick fix. Let's see if we can quick fix this problem. Quick fix, right? Studies, right? It fixes that problem for us. There's tons of tooling built into TypeScript, and this is why I use TypeScript. I don't use TypeScript because I can write classes easier and better only. I use it because of the tooling, because of the lookup, because of everything else that I got that I can get from TypeScript that is not available, and the advanced functionality. My module pattern is intact. I can use my module pattern nicely. This closure, right? And I don't have to use import or export. I just have to use the export keyword right there. All right, guys, that is an intro to TypeScript. We're going to do more of this coming forward. I'm just going to put this up on GitHub. So I'll added person and student classes, right? Let's try that again. Save all and commit. Sure. Why? Oh, this is a history. I don't care about the history. Push. Right? Any questions around any of this stuff? I like it too, Devesh. I think it is so much cleaner. It's better. And on top of that, it makes sense. Guys, I'll tell you right now, because you guys have TypeScript, and if you compare yourself to your peers and the other classes, I am much more confident now that if I gave you a little application to write with JavaScript, said, write me a JavaScript application, what should you do? Put together a tsconfig.json file, make it a JavaScript TypeScript file, convert it to JavaScript just like we've just done, and your JavaScript will look better, operate better. You'll have better code hinting and code coloring, all right, from your editor, right? By the way, it doesn't matter which editor. If you use WebStorm, great TypeScript support. If you use Atom, fantastic TypeScript support, right? Visual Studio even, not bad TypeScript support, okay? But my preference again is to use Visual Studio Code, all right? We're going to get more about this. We're going to learn more about TypeScript and everything else going forward, especially in the next semester when we start using Node.js. And start thinking about server-side scripting. How do I do server-side scripting with JavaScript? How do I take it to that level where I can use JavaScript everywhere, not just on the front end? I'm going to leave you with that thought, guys. Remember, there's two things to remember. One, your assignment is due next Friday at midnight. Two, there's no class on Monday. So the next time we're going to meet together is Wednesday of next week. Next Wednesday, a week from today. All right, so no class on Monday because of the civic holiday. Please keep that in mind that we've talked about before. So if you have any questions or concerns about your assignment, please email me. We'll go from there. Any questions at all before we stop for the day? Okay, guys, I don't see any questions. So what I'll do is we'll depart for today. Have a great weekend if we don't speak. For those people who I'm going to see on Thursday for our Linux course, I'm excited to do the dynamic visualization. Try it yourself first before we start, if you can make it work. And then on Thursday, we'll get together and do that dynamic visualization with charts. Again, Python's going to really ramp, so I'm looking forward to seeing you guys, the people that are with me on Linux on Thursday. Otherwise, enjoy the weekend, guys. I'm going to stop recording right now.